The assassination of Charlie Kirk was truly an act of domestic terror. Why is violence replacing political discourse in America? And Russia launched drones into Poland. Could these events in Europe and the Middle East combine into a worldwide conflict? With analysis, I'm joined by former CIA officer and defense and counterterrorism analyst and president of Lopez Liberty, Clare Lopez. Clare, thank you for being here. We originally intended to have you on to address the latest developments in that Israeli-Hamas conflict, but Wednesday's assassination of Charlie Kirk has shown that domestic terrorism is certainly an increasing factor in American life. Your thoughts, Clare, on what we saw at Utah Valley University earlier this week, obviously a planned political assassination.
Yeah, absolutely, Raymond. And I think the first thing to say is what a terrible loss, of course, for Charlie and his family, his beautiful wife and 2 children and rest of the family. But for America, this was a young man with such great promise who had already accomplished so much in terms of reaching out to young people in particular on college campuses. He spoke in defense of our Judeo-Christian principles that undergird our democratic republic in this country. And maybe that's what was not so well appreciated by some. What I would say is that the steady drumbeat of vile rhetoric, vile and violent rhetoric over these last weeks, months, cannot but have instigated, helped, prompted some, like perhaps, we don't know yet, but perhaps this shooter to go over the edge. We don't know yet what his situation is, but those who are already unstable, that kind of rhetoric can and does push some over the edge.
We are seeing now, Clare, pictures of persons of interest that the FBI is asking for people to call if you've seen this guy. You know, and again, we don't know if this is the shooter or not. It's a person of interest. A possible murder weapon was found wrapped in a towel nearby at a home. Shell casings found there and still in the weapon have trans and anti-fascist messages engraved on them. What should we take from all of this? The murder suspect is still at large.
Right. So again, we don't know that the photos released by officials are of the actual shooter. We should be clear. Could be person of interest at this point in time. But yes, authorities have found the bolt-action rifle that the shooter apparently used, tossed away in a forested area near the campus of the university. And on it, reportedly, have found fingerprints as well as unspent cartridges, casings as well, which would seem to point to perhaps this was not a professional killer who would otherwise, it seems, would have worn gloves and not left such evidence behind. But if the reports about what is written on that rifle, on those shell casings and unspent rounds, is accurate, it is being reported, at least, that there, as you said, Raymond, there are messages on there, wording on there about trans and anti-fascist rhetoric. We'll have to see exactly what that is.
Yeah, well, and there's it only rang a bell for me because he was asked, Charlie Kirk was asked about shooters and trans shooters in particular when that bolt engaged and that bullet flew. On August 22nd, in a shocking attack, there was that Ukrainian young lady, 23-year-old, sitting quietly on a light rail train in Charlotte, North Carolina. Suddenly, this guy from behind her, a repeat offender, stabs her in the neck, kills her. Security video shows the attacks of her final moments. And I have to say, the passive behavior of the bystanders ignoring her as she bled to death is simply horrendous. Americans seem to have a higher tolerance for this violence now, Claire, than perhaps in recent memory. Your thoughts? What is happening to us here?
You know, I noticed the same thing about the other passengers in that railway car. Before the attack, even, every single one that we could see in the frame of the videos that have been released, every single one of them was engrossed on their phones. They were not alert to anything going on around them, as unfortunately was the victim herself. Not to blame the victim, but to your point that, you know, there is simply a detachment when people are continuously absorbed in their phones and a lack of situational awareness. But to get to the horrific murder and this killer who had been released.
Yeah, there's also the rumination and the repetition of watching these violent acts on your phone. And I noticed young people yesterday, the shot of poor Charlie getting killed, people were passing that thing around and they're watching it on a loop. This does something to the psyche and the mind of a human being, and I don't think it's good. And I mean, we saw that church shooting in Minneapolis. Why do you think there's an uptick in these acts of violence, especially in areas you wouldn't expect, Utah, North Carolina, and against people of faith?
Well, I think you've nailed it right there, Raymond. It is against people and symbols of faith. And again, I'll go back to what I said in our opening comments there, and that is the combined effect over all of these weeks and months, maybe longer, of vile, hostile rhetoric coming from some across the United States against people of faith, against, of course, President Trump and his supporters, the MAGA movement in particular. I mean, that kind of rhetoric, again, repeated over and over again. If you really take the message and believe that, President Trump, that Christians are evil and need to be eliminated from the earth, again, unstable people. Now, this person who killed the young woman on the train, or again, if this person in Utah yesterday turns out to be trans, the question has to be, what are their medical situations, their psychological situations? Are they taking drugs? Are they habitual users of marijuana? How about vaping, which sometimes uses marijuana? All of these things are question marks at this point, remain to be looked into. But I think the cumulative effect of all of that taken together can tip vulnerable people over the edge.
I want to look at the international scene. On Tuesday, Israel attacked a group of Hamas leaders gathered in Doha, Qatar. And the Hamas leaders were meeting to consider a U.S. proposal for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The strike killed 6 people, 5 Hamas members, and a Qatari officer. The White House confirmed they received prior notice of the Israeli strike, but did not support Israel's decision to strike the Qatari capital. Claire, U.S. officials said the airstrikes undermine diplomatic objectives of both the United States and Israel. What do you make of Israel's expansion of its strikes outside of Gaza? Is this productive?
I'll refer to a headline I saw yesterday or so, a couple days ago maybe, and that headline was that President Trump is trying to thread the needle between Israel and Qatar. Now, of course, we are partners, friends, allies of the Jewish state of Israel, which was violently, viciously attacked on October the 7th. And then much more recently, the day before that attack got the green light in Doha, Qatar, there was another. Hamas took responsibility for it. Hamas attack by its military branch, the Izzadin al-Qassam brigades, against civilians waiting at a bus stop in Jerusalem, slaughtering 6 of them and injuring more. So these are the triggers that got Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to greenlight the operation. But more even broadly than that, yes, Qatar is a United States ally. We have the great big El Udeid Air Force Base there. I don't know why. It should be someplace else, in my opinion. But the point being that Qatar is a supporter, a backer of not only the Muslim Brotherhood for decades, but of Hamas itself, and obviously these Hamas leadership figures who were eliminated in that very surgical, by the way, surgical strike a few days ago. That is what happens when Israel stands up, rising lion, and fights back. And again, it followed not just the horrific October 7 massacre, but also the role, it gets to the role of Qatar in harboring and giving safe haven to Hamas, to funding Hamas, to helping provide it with weapons and other support, including Al Jazeera, meaning media support. This was a long time in coming, and I think Israel has additionally warned any other Hamas leadership that no matter where they are, if they are Hamas and they have been involved in support for the October 7 Shabbat massacre, they are a target.
Claire, Poland said on Wednesday that several Russian drones entered its territory over a course of many hours, and they were shot down with the help of NATO allies, describing the incursion into Poland as an act of aggression carried out during a wave of Russian strikes on Ukraine. What do we know, Claire, about these Russian drones and drone activity over Poland?
So in the past, over the months and indeed years of this war after Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, from time to time, an occasional or couple, 3 occasional drones have strayed. We'll go ahead and use that word, strayed over the Ukrainian border to the west and over Poland's territory. Now, this was a different situation. This was as many, I've heard different numbers, but as many as 15 to maybe almost 20 what they call suicide or kamikaze drones that not just crossed that border, Ukraine's western border with Poland, but traveled as far as over 150 miles into over Polish territory, at which point, as you say, NATO scrambled jets, and involved were jets from Poland, of course, itself, also Italy, Netherlands, and I think I heard Germany as well. What this was Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, conducting not just provocation, but a probe to see what would be NATO's response. Is it going to stand up, unify, and defend NATO territory? Vladimir Putin, as well as those around him, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the Deputy of the Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, the one I call Putin's Rasputin, Alexander Dugin, they've all specifically, and in English online, directly threatened Poland, as well as the Baltic states, all of which are NATO members.
Yeah, and they've been also doing military exercises with Belarus, which I don't have time to get into, but we'll do that next time. Today marks the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The ceremony began as it does every year at this time, with the reading of the nearly 3,000 victims of the 9/11 attacks, plus the victims of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Claire, what have we learned in the 24 years since that attack? And that mantra, never forget, is thrown around often without any direct discussion of the ideology behind the attacks. So perhaps, I guess, the better question is, what have we forgotten?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right to be asking those questions. I'll mention also that the night of September 11/12 is also the anniversary of the 2012 Al-Qaeda jihadi attack in Benghazi, in Libya, against our people, our mission, our special compound there, as well as the CIA base across town, in which 4 Americans were killed. What have we learned? What have we forgotten? Well, I was an expert witness in a legal case about 9/11 called the Havlish versus bin Laden et al., heard by Judge George Daniels in the Southern District of New York Federal District Court, in which Judge George Daniels, issued a ruling in late December of 2011 that Iran and Hezbollah were jointly co-responsible with Al-Qaeda for those attacks of 9/11. Yes, obviously also the Taliban played a role, also Saudi Arabia played a role too. But Iran was the regime that orchestrated and directed those attacks. And what we have not learned, even though all of this information, including the affidavit that I co-authored, all of this is online and openly available since 2011, we have not understood or ever held accountable the regime in Iran for its role in 9/11.
Clare, we will leave it there. Could talk to you all day. Thank you for your time and insight.
Thank you very much for having me.